"You'll work for me, Maya." That's what my sister said after she signed our mother's restaurant over to herself, behind my back. 3 years of double shifts, skipped birthdays, and saving every tip. And she erased my name like I never existed. But the part that broke me? She looked me in the eye, in the kitchen where we first dreamed up Ellen's Kitchen, and said it was generous. She offered me a job at my own mother's restaurant. But the betrayal didn't stop there. Later that week, I saw her, under the flickering streetlight behind the kitchen, slipping a thick envelope to some slick-haired stranger in an alley. And when she turned, she didn't even flinch. She said just 3 words, "Go home, Maya." Like I was the outsider, like this dream was never mine. They erased me from the dream I helped build. But that's not even the worst part. Because Mom left us a secret. And Sarah knew it the whole time. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, and it shattered everything, hit like. And if your heart's already aching for Maya, don't hesitate to comment, "I feel you." Funny how betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes wearing your mother's necklace and your last name, 3 years earlier. Savannah always smells like the ocean is trying to sneak into your lungs. That night, the breeze came through my kitchen window, carrying salt and the faint scent of low tide. It mixed with rosemary and garlic sputtering in the skillet, wrapping the room in something that felt like home. On the counter, a stack of old recipe cards sat fanned out, edges curled and stained with years of use. Mom's handwriting slanted across each one, careful loops and smudged ink from the nights we cooked until the windows fogged. Back then, Sarah was my shadow and my hero, rolling dough with the confidence of someone who believed she could make anything rise. After Mom died and Dad walked away, Sarah had squeezed my trembling hands and promised we'd open Ellen's Kitchen, her voice steady in a world that had come apart. For 3 years, I kept my part of the promise. Sunrise shifts at the diner, midnight closings at the seafood joint, money folded into a plain envelope under my mattress. Sarah had the business sense. I had the recipes. Together felt unshakable, or it used to. Lately, something in her eyes had shifted. At first, I told myself it was nothing: stress, exhaustion, the grind of saving for a dream. But each time I mentioned the restaurant, her gaze slid away, as if the words were too bright to look at. She'd change the subject, fiddle with her phone, stir a drink that didn't need stirring. Little things, like hairline cracks in a plate you've trusted for years. Earlier this week, over coffee, I'd shown her a sketch of the menu layout. She nodded absently, eyes locked on a stranger's conversation at the next table. I laughed it off, but the sound didn't reach my chest. Those moments began to stack, and somewhere between the stacks, doubt started living. The skillet hissed, a drop of oil catching my wrist. I flinched, pressing the spot with a towel, my reflection in the dark window catching the small wince. Outside, the street lamps threw gold halos on the wet pavement. A couple hurried past, their umbrella tilting in the wind, their laughter quick and easy. I sat down at my small table. The chair opposite stayed empty. I could still picture her there, pen in hand, sketching out table arrangements while we ate, ideas spilling faster than the ink. Now the silence between us had grown thick, almost physical, like a wall you can't see but always walk into. When I finished eating, I stepped onto the balcony. The humid air clung to my skin. Somewhere downtown, a saxophone threaded through the night, notes rising and fading against the brick facades. My eyes wandered to the box of keepsakes inside, sitting beneath the window. Inside were photos, letters, scraps of a time when Sarah's smile was the place I trusted most. The ocean breeze shifted, carrying a metallic tang, like rain was hiding around the corner. I gripped the railing, thinking about her last glance at me, quick, distant, and gone before I could name it. Sarah was my rock, but those glances, they felt like cracks in our promise. I stayed out there until the clouds swallowed the moon, the hum of the city settling into my bones. The recipe cards waited on the counter, their ink patient and permanent. I gathered them into their box, fingers tracing the title on the top card: Ellen's Kitchen, Rosemary Garlic Bread. A promise made in a warm kitchen, now balanced on an edge I didn't understand. I closed the lid. Somewhere the sound of clanging pans and a rush of voices rose in my mind, louder, sharper, the hum of a different kitchen, one I hadn't stepped into yet. The heat of the kitchen wrapped around me the second I pushed through the swinging door. Steam clung to my skin, carrying the scent of fresh bread that should have felt like comfort. Knives clanged in quick rhythm against cutting boards. Someone called, "Behind!" as a pan of scallops hissed, and the air was thick with that electric hum a restaurant gets when it's alive. Sarah's office door stood slightly ajar, its frosted glass catching a faint orange glow from the neon Ellen's Kitchen sign outside. Mom's name in looping script, the name we'd whispered over late-night coffee and greasy diner counters, shimmered through the haze. It pulled me in. The desk was a mess, ledgers stacked like unstable towers, pens bleeding ink stains into a legal pad, the faint smell of lemon cleaner undercutting the bread. But at the center, almost too perfectly placed, was a manila folder clipped shut. My eyes found the top sheet before I could stop them. It was a purchase contract. I scanned for my name, once, twice, 3 times. It wasn't there, not even as an afterthought. But Sarah's name, Sarah Carter, marched down the page in bold black ink, neat and confident. Sole proprietor. My throat tightened. I flipped another page. Terms, dates, signatures. Her signature over and over like she'd been rehearsing ownership. My fingers left damp marks on the margins. Looking for something? Her voice came from behind me, sharp enough to cut through the clatter outside. I turned. She leaned against the doorframe, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a streak of flour across her wrist. Her eyes flicked to the contract, then back to me, unreadable. "What is this?" My voice felt too small for the room. "What it looks like," she said, stepping in without closing the door. "We needed to move fast." "We?" I held the contract up. "You bought Ellen's Kitchen without me?" "Correction." She plucked it from my hand like I'd been holding it wrong. "I bought Ellen's Kitchen. The timing was right. My name's nowhere on this, Sarah. That's the part you notice?" Her tone was cool, almost amused. "You should be noticing that we're opening. Everything's in motion. It's happening." The noise from the kitchen swelled, plates hitting the pass, someone shouting, "Order up!" But it felt far away. I stepped toward her. "We said we'd do this together." She met my gaze, and for a second I searched for the sister who used to squeeze my hand under the table when things got bad. "We also said we'd make it work," she replied. "You don't understand the business side." 3 years, I said, my voice shaking. 3 years of saving, dreaming, trusting, gone in one signature. She tilted her head, almost pitying. "Don't be dramatic." Then, as if delivering a line she'd been saving, "You'll work for me, Maya." It landed like a punch. The heat in the room shifted, pressing down. "Work for you?" The words scraped my throat on their way out. "Head chef, if you want it." She was already turning back toward the door. "It's generous." Through the open blinds, I caught the glow of the neon sign outside, Mom's name, shining bright against the night. But now, standing here, it felt like it had been claimed by someone else entirely. I stayed frozen as she left the room, the clatter of the kitchen swallowing her up. The contract lay open on the desk, its black and white truth staring back at me. Somewhere between the hum of the ovens and the flicker of that sign, the dream we'd built together had been rewritten, and my name had been erased. The rain had followed me home, drumming against the window like it was trying to get in. My apartment smelled faintly of rosemary from dinner I never finished, the pan still sitting on the stove, cold. I tossed my bag on the couch and sat in the dark, the only light coming from my phone screen. My thumb swiped through old messages, years of them, from Sarah. "We'll do this together. Mom would be proud of us. One day, Maya, all this will be ours." Each line used to feel like a promise. Now they felt like little hooks pulling at my chest. I should confront her, march back to the restaurant, shove that contract in her face, demand to know why she cut me out. But then, like it always did, my mind slid back to that night after Mom died. We were on the back porch, the air heavy with the scent of wet magnolia. I couldn't stop shaking, even though the blanket she wrapped around me was thick enough for winter. Sarah held my hand the whole time, her thumb tracing slow circles over my knuckles. She didn't say it's going to be okay. She didn't have to. Back then, her presence was enough. I blinked hard, dragging myself back to the present. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in. I needed air, but instead I found myself kneeling in front of the closet, pulling out the old cedar box I hadn't opened in years. The brass latch stuck for a second, like it was protecting the past from me. Inside, everything smelled faintly of dust and the faint sweetness of old paper. Photographs curled at the edges. A Polaroid of Sarah and me on the beach, sand up to our knees, Mom's sun hat perched crooked on my head. Birthday cards. A recipe card for peach cobbler in Mom's handwriting, her M looping like ocean waves. And then, wedged between two envelopes, I saw it. A letter. The paper was thin, the ink faded in places, but I recognized the slant of Mom's handwriting instantly. "My girls," it began. I sat on the floor, the rain softening into a steady hiss outside. The letter was warm in my hands, even though it had been locked away for years. "One day, there will be a special gift for both of you, something I hope will keep you close, no matter what happens. You'll know when the time is right." That was it. No signature, no date. A strange unease settled in my stomach. What gift? Why hadn't she ever told us directly? I tried to picture the moment she wrote it, where she was sitting, what she was thinking. Was Sarah with her? Did Sarah know something I didn't? I read it again, slower this time. The words didn't change, but they felt heavier, like they were pressing on me. If Mom's gift was tied to Ellen's kitchen, maybe Sarah's betrayal wasn't just about business. Maybe it was about claiming whatever Mom left behind and cutting me out completely. I set the letter on the coffee table, staring at it like it might rearrange itself into answers. Outside, a car passed, headlights flashing briefly across the room, lighting up the edges of the paper. I thought of Sarah's face when she said, "You'll work for me," the calmness in it, almost like she'd already won something I didn't even know we were fighting for. The rain picked up again, rattling the window. I felt it then, something shifting inside me. Not anger this time, not even heartbreak. Resolve sharp and steady cutting through the fog in my head. If Sarah knew what Mom's letter meant, I was going to find out. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving Savannah's streets slick and shining, like someone had polished the whole city overnight. I walked fast, my shoes slapping against the sidewalk, the letter from Mom folded in my bag like a ticking clock. I couldn't just sit in that apartment anymore, turning the same questions over in my head. If Sarah was keeping secrets, I was going to drag them into the light. The county clerk's office sat on the corner of an old brick building, the kind that still smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how many fresh coats of paint they slapped on. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle as I stepped inside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making the air feel even more stale. I kept my voice light at the counter, smiling like I was there for something harmless. "Hi, I'm just checking on some property permits for our family's restaurant," I said, tapping my fingers against the form I'd scribbled on to look official. The clerk, an older man with thick glasses, didn't seem to care much about my story. He just shuffled away, came back with a manila folder, and set it in front of me. I flipped it open, scanning past lines of legal jargon until one sentence stopped me cold. Mortgage agreement secured against property. 412 Bayview Road. Mom's house. My throat went dry. I stared at the black and white words, half expecting them to rearrange themselves into something less devastating. But they didn't. Sarah had mortgaged the house, the one place in the world that still smelled like Mom's lavender hand cream, that still had the faded wallpaper she'd chosen herself. She'd sold off the last piece of her to fund Ellen's kitchen. Rage hit fast, sharp, like oil flaring up in a hot pan. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure no one was watching, and pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled as I snapped photo after photo of the documents, each click sounding louder than it should have in the hushed room. The paper under my hands felt thin, fragile, but the truth it held was heavy. She didn't just cut me out, I thought, my breath coming quicker. She burned the bridge back to Mom. I slid the folder shut and handed it back to the clerk, forcing my voice steady. "Thank you. That's all I needed." Outside, the sunlight felt wrong, too warm, too bright for what I'd just learned. Tourists strolled past with ice cream cones, and somewhere down the street a busker was playing guitar. The normalcy of it all made me want to scream. I stood on the corner, staring down at my phone screen, at the grainy photos of the mortgage papers. Mom's letter flickered in my mind. A special gift for both of you. Was this it? Had Sarah mortgaged the house to get her hands on whatever Mom left behind? The thought made my stomach turn. Part of me wanted to march straight to the restaurant, shove the evidence in her face, and demand answers. But another part, the part that had learned the hard way not to trust appearances, knew I needed more. If Sarah had already crossed this line, who knew what else she was hiding? A breeze off the river carried the smell of salt and fried shrimp from a cafe down the street. I closed my eyes, letting the wind cool my face, steady my breathing. Confrontation could wait. For now, I needed to keep digging. I turned toward the direction of Ellen's kitchen. If Sarah thought she could play me like this, she'd forgotten one thing. I'd grown up learning how to read the small tells in a person's face, the twitch in a voice, the shift of the eyes. And tonight, I was going to put that to use. The neon beer sign in the window buzzed and flickered, casting a restless glow across the bar top. I sat hunched over a sweating glass of water, tracing a finger along the condensation, staring at nothing. The noise from the dining room drifted in, clinking forks, low chatter, the sizzle of something hitting a hot pan. But it all felt far away, like I was underwater. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement. My phone buzzed in my lap. "You okay?" "Jake." I glanced toward the far end of the bar. He was half hidden behind the swinging door to the kitchen, one hand on the frame, the other holding his notepad. Same messy hair he'd had since high school, same crooked half smile, but tonight his brow was creased. I typed back, "Just tired." A moment later he walked over, slow and casual, the way you do when you don't want to draw attention. He leaned down, his voice barely above the hum of the beer sign. "She's been meeting someone," he said. "Some guy, not a regular, looks shady, like some investor maybe." I blinked, trying to focus. "Investor?" Jake's eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant, where the light dimmed into shadow. "They sit in that booth by the wall. You know the one. It's half hidden from the rest of the room. She always picks the corner facing away from everyone." His words pressed against my chest like a weight. "When?" I whispered. "Late. After the rush. Sometimes he comes in early, just sits there waiting." He hesitated, then leaned closer. "She doesn't want anyone to know, Maya." The way he said my name, low, careful, made the hairs on my arms stand up. The bar felt even darker for a moment, like the lights had dimmed in sync with his voice. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Sarah had always been the one in control, the one who kept her cards close. But meeting a man in secret? In our restaurant? That was something else. I forced a small, dry laugh. "You sure you're not just bored making up stories back there?" Jake didn't smile. His eyes caught the neon glow, glinting like sunlight breaking through rain. "I've known you since we were kids, Maya. I'm not making this up." Something inside me shifted, just enough to let a thin thread of hope through, a lead, a clue, maybe even an answer. I straightened in my seat, my shoulders no longer caving in. "What does he look like?" Jake shrugged, his voice still low. "Tall. Expensive suit, but not the kind you get tailored downtown, like he's trying too hard. Slick hair. Doesn't belong here." Outside, a burst of humid night air swept in as someone opened the front door, carrying the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. My thoughts felt just as thick, as heavy. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because..." He hesitated, his gaze locking with mine. "You deserve to know what's going on in your own place." My own place. The words stung. Ellen's kitchen might have my mother's name on the sign, but Sarah's name was on every document that mattered. I nodded slowly. "Thanks, Jake." He gave a small nod back and slipped away toward the kitchen, disappearing behind the door before I could ask anything else. The rest of the bar seemed to fade into a blur. My fingers tapped against the glass in front of me, my mind already running ahead. Who was this man? What did he have to do with Sarah? And why keep it from me? I stood, tossing a few bills onto the counter, and stepped outside. The night wrapped around me like a damp blanket, the air buzzing with the sound of distant traffic and cicadas. Somewhere behind me, inside the restaurant, Sarah was probably laughing with a customer, wearing that easy smile she'd mastered over the years. But now I saw something else in my mind, her leaning in close to a man in a dark booth, passing whispers and maybe more across the table. Jake's voice echoed in my head. "She doesn't want anyone to know, Maya." I pulled my phone from my pocket, staring at the black screen, until my reflection stared back. Jake might have just handed me the first real piece of the puzzle, but it came with its own shadow, and it was following me home. Jake's words wouldn't let me sleep. The image of some slick-haired man waiting in the shadows of the restaurant's back booth kept replaying in my mind, like a scene stuck on a loop. So I started picking up extra night shifts, just so I could be there, watching. Savannah's air was heavy with late summer heat, even after dark. The alley behind Ellen's kitchen smelled of damp brick and overripe trash, the kind of scent that clings to you long after you've left. I leaned against the rough wall, the faint rumble of music from the bar bleeding into the quiet. Overhead, a streetlight flickered, throwing the ground in and out of shadow. Through the narrow gap between the dumpster and the brick corner, I had a clear line of sight to the restaurant's back door. My pulse kept finding its way into my ears, steady at first, then climbing each time the door swung open. A dishwasher taking out trash, a delivery guy leaving empty-handed. Nothing unusual. Until Sarah stepped out. She moved fast, like she didn't want to be seen, her shoulders tight. In her hands, an envelope thick enough to bulge. She glanced over her shoulder before heading deeper into the alley, toward the mouth where it opened to the street. That's when he appeared. The same man Jake had described, tall, polished in a way that looked bought, not earned. His shoes caught the light for a second, sharp and glossy. He didn't waste words, just took the envelope, thumbed the edge like he was weighing it, then slid it into his jacket. I lifted my phone, thumb hovering over the shutter. The click was soft, but to me it sounded like a gunshot. Sarah stiffened. Slowly she turned. The flickering streetlight caught her face, jaw set, eyes narrowed, the kind of look that could cut through steel. She didn't call out, didn't ask what I was doing. She just said, "Go home, Maya." Her voice wasn't raised, but it might as well have been a shout. Each word landed like a door slamming in my face. I froze, my phone still in my hand, the screen glowing between us like a guilty confession. She held my gaze for one beat, then another, before walking away, the man falling into step beside her. Neither of them looked back. The alley felt colder after they were gone, even in the thick Savannah heat. My breath came shallow. She'd seen me. She'd known I was there the whole time. And she'd let me watch, like it didn't matter, or worse, like it was part of something bigger. I leaned against the wall, my fingers tingling from the adrenaline. The envelope, the man, Sarah's silence. It all stacked up into a shape I couldn't quite see, but I knew it was there, lurking just out of focus. "She saw me," I whispered to the empty alley, "but her silence feels like a trap." From somewhere down the street, a saxophone bled into the night, slow, mournful notes drifting over the hum of traffic. I pocketed my phone and stepped away from the wall, the grit of the pavement crunching under my shoes. Every instinct told me to follow them, to see where they were going, to finally get answers. But the weight of her voice, steady, commanding, pulled me back. "Go home, Maya." So I did. But home didn't feel safe anymore. Home didn't feel like home anymore, not after the alley, not after the way Sarah's voice, calm, clipped, had sent me retreating like a scolded child. The rain from earlier had stopped, but the air in my apartment was still thick, heavy. I set my bag down and went straight to the desk. The letter was still there, half buried under a stack of unopened bills and takeout menus. I pulled it out, flattening the creases with my palm. The paper felt older than I remembered, fragile, like it might tear if I breathed too hard. Under the yellow glow of my desk lamp, I read the words again, letting my eyes linger on each curve of Mom's handwriting. Halfway down, I noticed something I'd missed before. The ink had faded almost to nothing, tucked in the margin as if it were a private whisper. I tilted the page toward the light. "The house is for both of you to share. Beware of greed." My heart stuttered. The words blurred, then sharpened, like my brain needed a second to accept what my eyes were seeing. Mom hadn't just left us memories, she'd left instructions. And Sarah had burned right through them. She'd mortgaged the house. Not for survival, not for family, for Ellen's kitchen, for her name and lights. I sat back, the chair creaking under me. Every sound in the room, the hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of the street lamp outside, seemed to grow louder, pressing in. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone and hit her contact. The ring dragged on, each tone pulling my pulse higher. She answered on the third ring. "Maya?" Her voice was even, like she already knew why I was calling. "I found Mom's letter," I said. "She wanted us to share the house. You knew that." A pause, then a soft laugh, sharp as broken glass. "You don't get business, Maya. I did this for us." "For us?" The words caught in my throat. "You went behind my back. I kept this place alive," she cut in. "You think passion pays the bills? Grow up." I could hear voices in the background, clinking glasses, the murmur of the restaurant's dining room. She was working. She was calm. I was shaking. "You didn't just betray me," I said, my voice low. "You betrayed her." Another pause, then that same dry laugh. "You've always been too sentimental. This is business. End of story." She hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, listening to the dead air. My chest felt hollow, but beneath the emptiness, something colder was taking root. Not the raw, stinging hurt from before. This was sharper, more deliberate. She'd told herself it was for us. But I knew better now. This wasn't just about a restaurant, or money, or even me. She'd defied Mom's last words for her own gain. The glow from the desk lamp pooled over the letter, casting the edges in shadow. The ink seemed darker now, more urgent. Beware of greed. And I couldn't shake the image of that man in the alley, the envelope disappearing into his jacket. I set the letter down, my fingertips lingering on the paper, and felt the fury settle, quiet, steady, unshakable. This wasn't over. The next week felt like a punishment I hadn't been officially sentenced to. Sarah had me on every closing shift. Long nights where my hands ached from scrubbing pans, my shoulders knotted from carrying trays meant for 2 people. She called it staffing needs, but I knew better. This was her way of grinding me down, keeping me too tired to think, too worn to push back. That night the restaurant glowed under the chandeliers, their light spilling gold across the polished wood tables. The air was rich with the scent of rosemary and roasted lamb, the hum of polite conversation underscored by the soft clink of wine glasses. A VIP dinner. The kind of night Mom used to dream about when we talked about making this place ours. I'd worked all week perfecting the menu, fine-tuning every garnish, every plate's timing. By the time the guests arrived, I could move between courses like breathing. When I set my signature dish in front of them, seared red snapper with a citrus beurre blanc, the smiles, the murmurs of delight, told me I'd nailed it. But Sarah was watching from across the room, her smile stretched too wide, too practiced. As I began describing the dish to the table, she stepped forward. "Maya's dish isn't up to par," she said, voice light, but carrying enough weight to still the conversation. "I'll fix it." A ripple of polite confusion passed over the guests, but Sarah was already leaning in, replacing my plate with one she'd carried out herself. She made a show of sprinkling fresh herbs, letting her bangles catch the light. Laughter bubbled from her lips as she explained her adjustments. They applauded. For her. I stood there, heat crawling up my neck, my hands damp against my apron. I couldn't even taste my own food anymore. It had been erased right in front of me. My name, my work, vanished in a flourish of her smile. I stepped back, out of the circle of light cast by the chandeliers. In the dimness near the bar, I saw him, the man from the alley, seated at a small table, half in shadow. His suit was too crisp for this humid Savannah night, his eyes fixed on Sarah like he was measuring her. Later, as I carried a tray of empty glasses toward the kitchen, their voices floated from the hallway near the service door. "Maya won't fight back," Sarah said, her tone almost casual. "She's too soft." The words sank into me like ice. The man chuckled low, a sound that didn't belong here among clinking crystal and polite laughter. I couldn't see his face from where I stood, but I didn't need to. That easy agreement, that quiet exchange, it was an alliance, one I wasn't a part of. In the kitchen, I set the tray down too hard, the glass rattling. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted me to doubt myself so much that walking away would feel like my choice. But my hands, still trembling, weren't from defeat this time. They were from something sharper. She could take my shifts. She could steal my applause. She could tell her shadowy friend I was too soft. She had no idea I was already planning my next move. Jake's email came in the middle of my closing shift. The subject line blank, just a single paperclip icon telling me there was an attachment. I ducked into the walk-in cooler, letting the heavy door seal out the noise of clattering pans and low conversation. My breath fogged in the cold air as I opened it. Bank records, dates, amounts, signatures, all Sarah's. A massive loan, so big it made my stomach pitch, taken from a firm I didn't recognize. The name was generic, corporate, but when I Googled it, the first thing that popped up was an article about predatory lending and organized crime, and in the board photo, tucked in the far right corner, was him, the man from the alley, the man Sarah whispered with in the shadows. The air in the cooler seemed to press in on me. She'd risked not just the restaurant. Mom's house was listed as collateral. Our last piece of her, gone if Sarah missed a single payment. By the time I pushed back into the kitchen, I could barely hear over the thudding in my chest. My apron was still tied, but I ripped it off, tossing it on the counter. I didn't think about an umbrella. I didn't think about the storm that had rolled in. I just ran. The rain in Savannah doesn't fall so much as it crashes. Sheets of water blurred the streetlights into smears of gold. My sneakers slapped against the sidewalk, soaked through in seconds. Every block between me and the restaurant felt like a lifetime. When I reached the front door, the lights inside were still on. I pounded on the glass, my palms slipping. Sarah appeared from the dining room, her hair immaculate, not a trace of the storm touching her. Why? My voice cracked on the word. Why would you risk everything? Mom's house. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, like she was checking if anyone could hear. Then she stepped closer, her face a mask. Stay out of it, Maya. The words landed harder than the rain. She didn't yell. She didn't explain. She just shut the door. The click of the lock was louder than any slam. I stood there, water pooling around my shoes, until the lights inside went dark. By the time I got back to my apartment, I was shivering so hard I dropped my keys twice. The place smelled faintly of the chamomile candle I'd lit that morning, now just a cold stub on the counter. I sank into the chair by my desk, the only light coming from the small lamp in the corner. The letter was still there, folded in the same neat square, the ink faded at the edges. My fingers found the crease like muscle memory. The house is for both of you to share. Beware of greed. Mom had known. Maybe not exactly this, but something. She'd tried to warn us, and I'd been too busy believing in Sarah to see it. The rain outside slowed, turning to a steady drip from the fire escape. The quiet was worse than the noise. She'd taken everything. Mom's dream, our home, the future I thought we were building together. And now, sitting in the half-light, all I could feel was the question pressing in from every side. Who was that man? And why was she willing to risk it all for him? The room smelled of champagne and butter, the kind of scent that made people believe everything was perfect. Light from the chandeliers spilled over polished silverware, catching in the sequins of gowns and the sharp edges of wine glasses. Laughter rose and fell like waves, the kind that keeps you from hearing your own pulse, unless your heart is hammering the way mine was. I stood near the back, watching Sarah glide between tables like she'd been born in a dress that expensive. She laughed in the right places, tilted her head just enough to make someone feel special, but I could see it in her jaw, the tension, the calculation. Jake caught my eye from the bar, gave a small nod. My fingers tightened around the mic I'd been clutching for the last 10 minutes. I didn't know if I'd make it to the stage without my knees giving out, but I knew if I didn't, I'd never forgive myself. When the music dipped and the crowd's chatter softened, I stepped forward. The mic was cool in my hand, almost too light for the weight of what I was about to say. Sarah sold Mom's name to a corporation to franchise Ellen's Kitchen, I said, my voice shaking, but I forced the words out. Not for us. The sound of my voice in the speakers was sharper than I expected. Heads turned. A few gasps cut through the stillness. The servers froze mid-step, trays hovering in the air. Sarah stopped in the center of the room, her back to the light so her face was in shadow. For a moment I thought she might laugh it off, charm her way through like always. But she didn't. Her skin had gone pale, the color draining fast. "You don't get it," she said, her voice slicing through the murmurs. "I'm saving this place." The words echoed, but her eyes, those cold, steady eyes, told me exactly what she wasn't saying. This wasn't about saving anything. It was about owning everything. I heard someone at the next table whisper, "Franchise?" Another said, "She'd never," but their voices blurred into the pounding in my ears. Sarah took a step toward me, slow, deliberate. "You think too small, Maya. This could put us on the map. You should be thanking me." Thanking her. For selling the last piece of Mom that hadn't already been mortgaged, leveraged, or gambled away. For replacing family with a brand name and a board of strangers. She's lying again, I thought, my fingers digging into the mic. But this time, I'm done believing her. I wanted to shout every detail, the loan, the mysterious man, the alley under the flickering streetlight. But I knew if I did, she'd spin it, make me the villain. She was always better at the crowd. So I let the silence stretch instead. I let the weight of my words settle into the glossy room, between the chandeliers and the starched linens. Sarah's smile came back, slow and thin. "We'll talk later," she said, and to the crowd, "Enjoy the night. Big things are coming." The applause was hesitant, scattered, but it came. People wanted their free champagne and canapes more than they wanted truth. I stepped back, my heart still pounding, but something had shifted. The hurt was still there, raw and burning, but under it, a steady, stubborn heat. She might think she could pull me back in later, but I knew now I wasn't her pawn anymore. The night after the gala smelled of leftover champagne and expensive perfume, the kind of scent that clung to you whether you wanted it or not. My ears still rang from the applause, thin, obligatory, after my words on stage. I was halfway to the door when Sarah's voice cut through the hum of the dining room. "Maya, come with me." Her tone wasn't sharp. It was soft, like honey melting into tea. That softness had always been the most dangerous part of her. I followed her down the narrow hall to her office, the carpet muffling our steps. Inside, the air was cooler, scented faintly of leather and lemon polish. The window framed Savannah's skyline, neon signs blinking like they were winking at some private joke. She shut the door slowly, the click sounding final. "Come back, Maya," she said, leaning against her desk, arms folded in a way that made her look casual, except for her eyes. "You need me." That's when I saw it. Around her neck, catching the low amber light, was Mom's necklace. The gold chain was still fine and delicate, but the pendant, an oval locket etched with a fading rose, was unmistakable. I'd searched for it after Mom passed, tearing through boxes, asking Sarah over and over. She'd always shrugged. It must have gotten lost in the move. And here it was, hanging from her like a trophy. Something inside me snapped, not with a bang, but with the cold, clean crack of ice breaking on a lake. I stepped forward, close enough to smell the perfume she'd worn at Mom's funeral. Without a word, I reached up and yanked the necklace from her neck. The clasp gave way with a tiny metallic pop. Her breath caught. "Maya." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need myself." I didn't look back when I turned for the door. My palm closed around the necklace, its edges digging into my skin, grounding me. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something sharper, almost electric. Out in the hall, Jake was waiting. His tie was loose, his hair a little damp like he'd run to catch me. "You need to know," he said, glancing over his shoulder before lowering his voice. "The guy you've been seeing with her? He's a corporate rep. He came in months ago, pitched a buyout. She was in debt. Bad. He offered her a way out, but the deal was poison. She signed anyway." "Debt?" I asked. Jake nodded. "From the loan, from the expansion, from other things. She didn't want to lose the place, but..." He hesitated. "She also didn't want to lose the power." The pieces fell together like a cruel puzzle, the mortgage on Mom's house, the thick envelope in the alley, her dismissal at the gala. It hadn't just been greed. It had been a choice, a deliberate decision to keep her seat at the head of the table, even if it meant burning the table down. She wore Mom's necklace like a trophy, I thought, my grip tightening. "But it's mine now." Jake's eyes softened. "I'm sorry, Maya." I shook my head. "Don't be. You just gave me what I needed." Outside, the night air was warm, sticky, alive with the hum of traffic and distant music. I slipped the necklace into my pocket, feeling its weight settle there like a promise. I didn't know exactly what starting over would look like, but I knew this. I was done letting Sarah write my story. The salt air hit me first, Savannah's ocean breeze curling through the fairgrounds, warm and sweet. My food truck's awning flapped gently above me, strings of colored bulbs swaying in rhythm with the crowd. The griddle hissed behind me, bread crisping to that perfect golden brown, the same way Mom used to make it. The smell wrapped around me like an embrace I'd been missing for years. Jake was at the window, sliding a paper plate to a laughing couple, his forearms dusted with flour. "3 more orders of the shrimp rolls," he called back. I nodded, dropping the dough into the hot pan, watching the edges bubble. Somewhere behind the chatter of families and the distant thump of fair music, I thought I could hear Mom's voice, humming to herself like she used to in the kitchen. I reached into my apron pocket and touched the necklace, Mom's necklace, resting against my palm. It wasn't heavy, not anymore, more like an anchor keeping me steady in a sea that had once tried to pull me under. Earlier that morning, I'd stood at the post office counter, Mom's letter in one hand, a smaller note in the other. My handwriting was neat, deliberate. Mom wanted us to share, not steal. I slipped both into an envelope and wrote Sarah's name across the front. No return address. The clerk had asked if I wanted it sent express. I told her no. Let it take its time, the way truth always does. Now, between plating dishes and calling out orders, I caught myself wondering if Sarah had opened it yet, if she'd read Mom's faded words and felt anything, guilt, regret, even a flicker of loss. Or maybe she'd just toss it into a drawer, another thing she could ignore until it stopped making noise. A little girl with hair and messy pigtails ran up to the window, her father trailing behind her. "It smells so good," she said, standing on tiptoe to see inside. Her eyes landed on the rolls cooling on the rack, and I smiled. "These were my mom's favorite," I told her, setting one gently on a plate. She took a bite, her cheeks puffing out, and gave me a thumbs up. For a moment my chest ached, not with the sharp pain I'd carried after losing Sarah, but with something softer. The ache of knowing some things can't be fixed, but life keeps moving anyway. Jake leaned against the counter during a lull, wiping his hands. "You okay?" I looked out at the fair, at the lights reflecting in the puddles from yesterday's rain, at the faces of strangers who didn't know my history, only my cooking. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I think I am." The line started to build again, the hum of the crowd pulling me forward. I wasn't standing in Sarah's shadow anymore. I was building something of my own, one roll, one plate, one customer at a time. Still, as I tied my hair back and reached for the next batch of dough, a question lingered like a stubborn whisper. Would Sarah ever see what she'd lost? I didn't have the answer. Maybe I never would, but I knew this. True strength wasn't about getting her back. It was about keeping myself. Have you ever had to walk away from family to find yourself? Share your story in the comments, like, and subscribe for more tales of courage.